Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch Podcast. That is, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch Podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot here with Joe Sternberg and Mary Anastasia O'Grady on Potomac Watch, the Wall Street Journal Opinion Pages podcast, daily podcast. So I just want to note one other thing about this decision, Mary, before we move to somewhat more speculative politics, and that is this Federal Open Market Committee meeting had a dissent, the decision to cut by 50, and that was by Michelle Bowman, who is Federal Reserve Governor. She wanted only 25, and that suggests there was some debate inside the FOMC about whether to go as aggressively as Chairman Powell clearly wanted. Interesting, the first real dissent on monetary policy in a couple of years at the Fed.
Yeah, I think it actually reflects a higher level of ambiguity or, uncertainty among the entire committee. Going into this decision, the market, when you talk to analysts, they were pretty much divided as whether they would go 25 or 50. And I think there were a heck of a lot of people on the committee who were uncertain about which way to go because they don't want to be accused of being behind the curve and they don't want to be accused of letting, the inflation come roaring back. And so they were really just trying to straddle that fence and they had to make a decision. And I think what happened was the chairman wanted that 50 basis points and he convinced everybody except for Mickey Bowman, that they had to go that way. So normally what will happen is a chairman will keep working until he gets full agreement. And in this case, he was willing to go with that dissent because he thought that this was an important move for the committee and he convinced enough people to fall on his side of the fence. But I think there was a lot of uncertainty among a number of the members of the committee.
Well, the Powell chairmanship has been marked most of the time by unanimity, so this is notable for having that debate. Let's turn to the next president of the United States. We actually do have an election coming up, and Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, either one, would have the choice, if elected, of who to make Federal Reserve Chairman in early 2026. That's how long Chairman Powell's current term will go. Some speculation that Donald Trump might come in and fire Jerome Powell. I doubt that would happen. But his term does run out in early 2026. So by sometime in the fall of 2025, the next president probably will have to make a decision about who to make Federal Reserve Chairman. I know from my reporting going back to the first Trump term that Donald Trump was persuaded to pick Jerome Powell by Steve Mnuchin, the then Treasury Secretary, because they thought he would be somebody who could be something of a pushover when it came to monetary policy. That did not prove to be the case. But Powell has presided over that huge run-up in inflation, which Trump is campaigning against. So I think you have to figure the odds are very low that Donald Trump would reappoint Powell. Who he would appoint is hard to say. The last time we had this, there were various people were a finalist. Kevin Warsh, the former Fed governor, was, I think, kind of maybe with Powell, the last one, thought about who was in the running, didn't get the job, which was a shame. I thought he would have been a better choice. John Taylor of the Hoover Institution and Stanford economist was in the mix. John now is quite old and probably too old to be Fed chairman. But Kevin Hassett, who was the economist and a good economist, who was the head of the chairman of economic advisors in the White House in the first Trump term, I think he is a candidate for Fed chairman. Who do you think he's looking at, Joe?
Well, I think that the big problem that you run into if we have another Trump administration is that, as you pointed out, Trump has discovered that voters really, really do not like inflation, and that has become one of his strongest election issues. Problem is, Trump is a longtime real estate guy, really, really likes low interest rates.
He sure does.
There is a natural tension there, and then there's also the issue that, some of the things that the three of us us might think would make for a good Fed chairman are not going to interest Trump at all. So, for example, I would like to see someone in that position who has a better understanding of the supply side of the economy and how monetary policy interacts with production and investment, to generate growth that way, who can get out of sort of the Keynesian mold that a lot of them end up getting stuck in. And that's going to be a debate that I think would probably be very difficult to have with Trump. So I think that the key thing that we would be looking for at that point is which of those two, angels or demons on Trump's shoulder would win out. The guy who understands that his political best interest is keeping the brake on inflation, or the guy who has really, really internalized this notion that low interest rates are always and everywhere good for growth, even if there isn't always a lot of evidence that that's true.
Devil or angel on the Trump shoulder, who wins out? I think I know. But I will leave that for others to infer. Mary, think about Kamala Harris's pick. She's been in the White House during this period of a huge flare-up in inflation and had to run against its consequences as she now seeks the White House. But Joe Biden had reappointed Powell, who was first appointed by Donald Trump. Do you think she's likely to do it again?
Well, I think that between now and toward the end of next year, that's an eternity in politics and maybe also in Federal Reserve policymaking. So Powell certainly messed up in this whole transitory inflation argument, but he's also worked very hard to redeem himself. And between now and, say, October or November of next year, when she has to start thinking about this, I think there's a good possibility that if he looks like he's done a good job of basically what I said before in threading the needle and avoiding a recession while he brought down inflation, there's a good chance he would be renamed.
Joe, what do you think?
Well, I think that the key issue there, first off, is going to be whether Democrats are still antsy about inflation or whether they think that they can go back to giving free rein to some of their concerns on climate issues or racial justice, and whether they would be looking for a Fed chairman who would be prepared to play along with that kind of Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders style agenda, which I think is really the big concern that I would have about the situation if we do end up in a Harris administration. But other than that, it's more of the same kind of conventional economic thinking that we've had all along is generally what I would expect in that kind of scenario.
Yeah, that's a very important point about the potential political malleability on some of these progressive priorities by the next Fed chairman. Powell, to his credit, has resisted some of them. All right. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Mary. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back tomorrow, and we're here every day on Potomac Watch. We sure appreciate your listening.